thanks so much for joining us here today on a cold Manitoba day. My name is Jonathan Lay, and I'm going to talk a little bit about some digital tools and some best practices that I've found when dealing with projects of varying complexity and scope. Just for a little background on me, I'm currently the training director at Media Manitoba, which is serves the interactive digital media sector. It's kind of like Creative Manitoba, but more more in the digital space. I spent 15 years as in the broadcast world, where I worked as a producer, which I still do a little bit of freelance on. So I feel like I'm kind of uniquely positioned to speak to a lot of different ways of working on projects of smaller scope. I have no PM designation, so if you're looking for tips on like how to project manage a skyscraper construction, this is definitely the wrong class. But hopefully, I can share some tips and some ideas that I've come across in the last 10 years, working with all sorts of kind of people from the artist side of things and people from the tech side of things. I think that's where my perspective is really unique. Working at Media Manitoba, I get to see how that works, across dozens of IDM companies. So let's just dig right into it. As I mentioned, New Media Manitoba, we support digital innovation in the province of Manitoba. We work with all sorts of companies, big and small, who are in the IDM space. So anyone who's kind of digital and creative, that's kind of our main purview. So this could be AR companies, VR companies, app developers, you kind of name it. Anything kind of creative and with a tech bent is definitely our purview. So here's my very loose agenda. I'm just going to talk a little bit about the nature of kind of modern work and how I have seen it change in the last 10 years. I'll talk about my project management light style. And I'll talk about some digital tools, and I'll definitely spend some time talking about setting yourself up for success, which in my opinion is 100 times more important to whatever tool you decide to use. And then a little bit of time for Q&A. So I also try not to be super prescriptive. This is just my experience and kind of what I'm using right now, and it's always changing. There's always kind of slight tweaks to the way I'm working based on the project I'm working on and kind of what new things I've come across. So when I was in film school many years ago in my clove cigarette smoking days, if anyone who's done an intro film class will be familiar with Auteur Theory, right? This is where, it's the director is the most important person in the project. And, when you're young and kind of idealistic, there's a lot of romance you can attach to that idea that it's going to be a single person kind of really driving the vision of a creative project. And it's when I started working in the real world, I found that it wasn't that far off from industry too, right? Like the people who are in charge will dictate what the project is, and they'll tell you what to do, and you'll execute it. So a very hierarchical sort of a system. And when I first came into the broadcast world and was working in unions, it was very much like that. If you were a cameraman, then you worked the camera. If you were an editor, you worked the editing system. And there was someone telling you what to do. And I found that the nature of that type of work and that kind of romanticism about the genius kind of sharing his vision and allowing other people to execute it has really changed. And in my time in the corporate world, it was amazing how much time I spent working on org charts and how important and crucial that was to things. And I understand from a management point of view that might be really important, but to me as someone who manages project, this is kind of irrelevant. Any sort of hierarchical structure, it kind of at this point to me doesn't really matter anymore. So I found this quote about Steve Jobs kind of interesting, because I think he was the first person who sort of kind of made that shift from that old way of I have the vision, you execute it, to hey, I have the vision, but if you've got a better idea, I'm totally open to implementing it. So the quote here by was that he was one of those people who, if you had the best idea, it won. but you know, he was a smart person, so you'd have to have a good idea. And I think that's like, you know, obviously there's all sorts of terrible things about him as a person that you kind of hear for his project management style. But I think that kind of mantra of like the best idea should win. Like, and it shouldn't matter whether you're the CEO or whether you just started yesterday. You know, that best idea should always win, and that kind of leads us into the way I'm thinking about work now, which is that we need creative collaboration, and we need a framework for that creative collaboration for it to be really successful. And having a diverse and divergent kind of viewpoints on your team is only really going to strengthen your project, because now we have tools and we have access to systems that will allow us to validate a whole bunch of ideas very quickly, where, you know, 10, 20 years ago, it was very expensive to prototype an idea. Now it's really easy to very quickly kind of have a whole bunch of ideas and kind of figure out very quickly which is the best idea and which one is the one that you should maybe pursue to fruition. What I'm learning from software developers is a lot of this ideation, a lot of this, like, you know, feedback both from the internal teams, but maybe also from customers, from people who are going to be consuming whatever project or collaboration you have. Like, bringing that feedback in early in the cycle of a project is really kind of setting yourself up for success. You know, it seems that the main focus on digital products is always at that onset is to generate as many ideas at the top as quickly as possible. You never just want to have one idea, because that constrains you to that one way of thinking, and that'll see it through all the way to the end of the project. You don't want to have just two ideas, because then it's an A/B sort of binary choice. But as soon as you kind of exceed that threshold for ideas, then you can open it up to your team, and you can really sort of consolidate some feedback and idea generation on which one is the best one. So yeah, just consolidating as many ideas from your team as you can at the onset will really lead to good outcomes, and it's something that you see in software and product testing all the time. I apologize, my notes are kind of hidden here. I just want to make sure I'm not missing anything. Yes, okay, so I'm going to just play a quick little video and talk about design thinking, which is a very kind of trendy topic, and design sprints. These are used a lot in innovation and technology right now. And it's just really kind of, you know, at its basic, it's when you kind of break down past the buzzwords, it's nothing really overly complicated and nothing that people haven't been doing for a long time. But it's just a lot of iteration, it's a lot of planning, and it's kind of a lot of road mapping for your projects. And then sprinting is when you're kind of going through something and you're prototyping and you're validating your ideas very quickly. So sprints are very, very typical in software development. And I'm just going to play a quick little video after I show this, which is the phases of a sprint. So it's basically broken out to 5 days for a design sprint. And design sprints for innovation and products are usually for very big picture problems. It's not for like, hey, where should we put the coffee maker? It's more for like, you know, what digital product does our customer want right now? And it really kind of requires like a lot of buy-in from your team. So this can be for companies or small teams working together. But it's really like, you know, day one will just be like assessing the problem. Day two, you're going to kind of start getting opinions on the ideas and ideating a little bit. And then day three, you're going to start deciding which idea you want to pursue. And then 4 is prototyping. And prototyping is really cool now because there's so many tools that will allow you to create like applications or, you know, design documents that are, you know, very high in fidelity that will really give someone like a stakeholder, external stakeholder, a good idea of whether this project is something that should be invested in more fully. And then validating your ideas on day 5 with some user testing. User testing is also very big in our space because that's where you're going to learn how the end users are actually going to be interacting with your idea. So let me play a quick little video here. It's only a minute long. And where did this, can I move this here? So IDEO is a design firm in the States that kind of came up with this methodology, along with some folks from Google, particularly around sprints. Sorry. Why aren't you gonna let me just play a video here? Okay, there we go. So hopefully the people online, if you can't hear this, I apologize for the next 90 seconds, but I'll share the link at the end. I'm Jake from Delegating, and this is a super fast intro to our sprint process. The big idea with the sprint is to build and test a prototype in just 5 days. Kind of like fast forwarding into the future, so you can see how customers react before you get all the time and expense of building a real product. Every sprint starts with a big challenge. A team of about 70 have a clear calendar. On Monday, you create a map of the problem and choose one specific target. On Tuesday, you create solutions to your problem. But instead of just shout out loud to the brainstorm, you'll work along to sketch detailed competing solutions. On Wednesday, you'll pick the best solutions. Instead of endless debate, you'll use a structured decision-making process. On Thursday, you'll build 1, 2, or even 3 realistic prototypes. These prototypes are just a facade of a finished product. You can use tools like Keynote, Marvel, and Vision to create fake apps and websites, or to quickly prototype hardware, you can use a 3D printer, or modify an existing product, or just prototype the marketing materials. Finally, on Friday, you'll test your prototypes in 5 one-on-one customer interviews. You'll find obvious patterns. Some solutions will work, but some won't. Either way, you'll have clarity about what to do next and a great start on that big challenge. To learn more, check out our book, Sprint. It's got detailed hour-by-hour instructions and packed stories about startups like Slack, Medium, and Cloud.com. Good luck with your sprints, and thanks for watching. Yeah, so that's a very condensed version of what a sprint is, and it's really exciting to see these things in action, to see like how much just how many great ideas can be generated really, really quickly without kind of getting bogged down in a lot of back and forth that I've seen in the past with kind of brainstorming sessions and things like that. How can this work for people who are pursuing artistic projects? Well, that's something that I've really come across in the last little while, working with some collaborators who definitely have a much more artistic bent than a tech bent. But what I found has been really successful is implementing that framework or a version of that framework at the onset to really corral ideas from artists. Artists are just naturally have a lot that they want to share, and they have a vision, but what they often don't have is a lot of kind of guidance for how those ideas can be conveyed, coherently, and how a larger team can kind of weigh in on those ideas. Now that tech is kind of informing a lot of artistic practices, there's a lot more complexity that are going into our artistic projects. So I think bringing some of those best practices from the tech world into your creative collaborations can be really, really powerful. So this kind of all plays into kind of an agile methodology, which is a whole discipline for software development particularly, but it's really kind of focused around the cores of like self-organizing and bringing in multidisciplinary teams. So if we were in the software world, it might be a manager, it might be a developer, it might be a marketing person. But with creative collaborations, it could be whatever we want it to be. It could be it could be a graphic designer, it could be a writer, it could be someone who's kind of steering the ship with all the logistics of things. So kind of having kind of clear roles and assigning a great team is really useful, and applying this type of framework to how you manage those teams is powerful. So now we're finally to the tools part of the lesson. And sorry, I went on a bit of a rabbit hole for like imagery. So first, there's going to be like a lot of samurai stuff for the next little while. I don't really know why. It's just the first image came up, and I thought I should be consistent. So anyway, choosing your weapons and technique. So you know, there's a lot of thought to like what tools we should use, and like every single person you meet who's doing projects or who's creating anything will have their preferred way of working, or their preferred way of or their preferred tools. So you know, right from the onset, I should suggest, like, don't get attached to any one particular tool, because someone's either is going to hate it, or it's going to be discontinued, or you know, it's just not going to work for your particular project. So you know, really be kind of malleable in whatever tool you pick, but be very adamant in its implementation throughout the project. So if you say, well, this is how we're going to use our document review, this is how we're going to use our project management, then you have to get complete buy-in from every person there that that's what they're going to use. There's nothing I hate more than working on a project and someone just completely going off the game plan and start working in some other tool that doesn't necessarily work with the tools that we're using. So, you know, get that at that initial kickoff meeting that you have with your collaborators, just like, you know, get the input, find out what tools you collectively want to use, and then if you are the kind of the project manager for the duration of the project or the event, just make sure that, you know, everyone keeps on with those tools. Otherwise the wheels will come off. So now we're at this point, like as I'd mentioned with the sprint, for like, oh, how do we want to generate ideas? So a sprint is a great way for us to do that. If you have everyone together, you know, in a room, and you can spare all that time. But I know that's not often possible, and you know that kind of limits us, right? We can collaborate with anyone in the world now, so we shouldn't limit it to the people who can be in a room together. So I'm gonna just kind of talk about Milanote. And like I said, whatever tool I present, you'll probably have heard of 10 other competing tools that kind of do the same thing. So once again, I'm not being prescriptive in saying, okay, you should use Milanote. It's just kind of what I use and what I like to kind of generate ideas with for my collaborators who are not in the city. So I will pop over to Milanote. And it's basically just like a big kind of whiteboard that lets kind of you see graphically very quickly what you're working on. So I apologize for what's in here. It's just kind of a project that I had working on, so I hope there's nothing too inappropriate here. But it basically lets you just like put in bits of everything, bits of text, you know, images. So I can assign like boards for people and say, hey, you know what, this is a character. These are some characters that I'm you know, I'd like to write something around. Can you generate like some looks for it? Like what do you envision that for casting? What could that look like? It can be audio. You can annotate things. You can draw connection lines to other things. So it's just a really great way to collaborate digitally. So this usually when I kick off a project with someone, this is kind of where I start, and it'll be an empty canvas, and then very quickly we can start, you know, adding, you know, all sorts of ideas for locations, and, you know, for to-dos. I can assign to-do lists. It seems like every single tool that I'm going to talk about has some to-do list in it, so you can kind of get overwhelmed by to-dos sometimes. But all that stuff is in there, and then, you know, you have a mood board right away that, you know, could potentially be used for pitching, or for, you know, to kind of share your vision with people. And you know, I mean, we're a visual people, and there's so many great assets now. So if I say, well, what does an 80s arcade look like to someone who wasn't born a long time ago, that can be like a hard thing to convey. But, you know, very quickly I can provide all my research and say, like, well, this is what an 80s arcade looked like, and good Lord, it was scary looking. So yeah, that's Milanote. I really like using it. Every single tool will have some kind of tiered system in regards to functionality. So At the base level, you'll be able to maybe create X number of projects, and if you want to kind of have the more robust version, you'll be kicking some more money up to them. So everything's got a free program, so you should just at least try it out. Yeah. Not when if you go to the paid version, then you can invite. I think you can have unlimited collaborators. So I think they have view access. They might not just have all the access to the functionality that you as the administrator has for Millinode. But for this one, I found I haven't had to shell out for it yet. Yeah. Yeah, we're gonna be touching on Trello. This is like my visual Trello, in that there's not, there's no structure to where things are. They can just be completely messy, which I like. This is my messy brainstorming. Yeah. So yeah, when my notes here say like be messy. Like I love that there can be one phase of the process that is just completely free form, because we're applying so much. We're applying so many rules and systems to everything else that comes in the process. This is the funnest part for me anyway. Okay. So keeping on with my theme, assembling your team. So there's so much expertise and creative energy like just flowing around in the city that like this part is kind of fun too. Like I look at it like, the Dirty Dozen. You're like, oh, I need my explosives expert. I need my saboteur. I need my language expert. So finding the right people to fit your team is really fun part of the process for me too. I don't have any expertise on or advice on how you can best do that, but obviously every organization, for every discipline in town, there's an organization like Creative Manitoba or New Media Manitoba that have loads of skilled members and people. So if you're a painter and you're looking to expand your discipline a little bit, and you've been hearing about VR sculpting, then give someone like New Media Manitoba a call and say, hey, this is what I'm looking to do. Do you know people who do this? And everyone in town is so warm and inviting, they'll probably give you some great leads. And I think it's really, for me, what's exciting about this time is that like the possibilities are so wide open that you don't have to just kind of keep your head down and keep doing the same work that you always do. You can really expand your base and include some talented folks. So once you've assembled that team, how do you manage them? And I took a step back and I kind of looked at the key tools that I use for like kind of more like, okay, I'm editing a show for someone, or I'm working at New Media Manitoba with our internal team on some project. What are some of the tools that I use the most? And it kind of fell under a couple buckets for me. It was like, okay, I have tools for project management, which is Trello, which we'll touch upon in a second. For communication, it's Slack and unfortunately email a lot of the time. And for review, it's a service called Frame.io, which I'll also show off. One big thing I'm really trying to push in the last couple of years is to keep stuff away from email. I find that really hard to track, especially like probably all of you. I'm working on so many projects concurrently. I hate trying to find some bit of information in email. So I try and keep as much inter-project communication as possible on tools like this. And once I kind of go through these very quickly, I'll talk about some of the integrations that all of these tools have and how they can talk to each other. So first up is Trello, which is a very popular Kanban board. Kanban is something that was started, that was popularized by the Japanese, especially in manufacturing. And it's definitely spread to the software world and beyond. And it's really simple. What makes the most sense about Kanban boards is it's just really orderly. So generally speaking, it's kind of a left to right type of approach, but you can create as many boards as you want within Trello. And then within a board, you have lists, and within lists, you have cards. Cards can be moved around, reassigned however you want. They can be prioritized by color. So, generally speaking, with software type of projects, in your in progress list, there'd be a long list of like, hey, these are all the things we want to get done with this this current sprint or this current week of work that we're going to be doing. So everyone kind of has different sprint runs, but let's say it's a week. So for our sprint this week, we're going to put everything in process. Okay, we're going to make a new landing page. We're going to generate analytics. We're going to have branding guidelines. This is just generated from a template, FYI. So once I have that in my sprint, I can create all those cards, and then I can punch into the card. And this is where the power of Trello like really gets unlocked. And I can add different members to this. I can assign this task to like, I'm going to assign it to Juliet. So there she goes. I have labels, as I said, for prioritization. I have due dates, which is another thing. The calendars will come up for each task. I can add attachments if there's something necessary that I need to have there. For creative ones, it could be imagery. It could be a branding guideline. I can link to all my digital storage, Google Dropbox, or Google Drive, Dropbox, Box, OneDrive, you name it. If I pay for this, I can unlock even further integrations. There's comments in here. So it's really just a really concise way of managing a project and managing a team. And I find like, I'm kind of at the point now where I have to kind of say, okay, I'm not going to create any more boards for a while because it can get kind of overwhelming, but you can kind of see all the various boards I have kind of going concurrently. And it's just really quick for organizing stuff. And intuitively, it just makes a lot of sense for someone who's not necessarily like project minded. And that's definitely me. Like none of this comes naturally or easy to me. I'm a very scattered person. So I have found that this system just really works. So if you're the type of artist who likes to put Post-it notes on the wall for how you're doing a project, this is just a digital version of that with a lot more horsepower. So that's what I use for project management. Slack is something that I honestly have struggled to get working internally at New Media Manitoba. It's competing against a lot of other channels, whether it's text messages or emails or phones, and like I said before, everyone has their own preferred method of communication. What I feel like Slack offers that text message doesn't offer is threaded conversations. So if I'm having like a certain conversation or certain project, I can create that as a channel. Channel can be, I can just keep the chatter on that channel just to that project, which is very useful in going back to things. I can have, once again, attachments, comments, all that sort of thing. I can create multiple boards, which is what things can live in. It can get like on some dev laptops I look at, like that whole left bar is completely populated and more. So there can be a lot of noise coming at you through Slack, especially people kind of use it almost as a work distraction. So people can put a lot of noise on Slack, unfortunately. And there was a really unfortunate event that happened down in the States. If you follow tech news, with the tech company that makes luggage, and they banned all email communication internally on their team, but they found that their employees were kind of griping about some of the working conditions within their Slack channels, and those Slack channels got made public, and it caused a lot of problems. So you just have to be really mindful. It can be really distracting, or it can be really useful if you're manageable about it. It has a mobile apps, so everything syncs across things, and yeah, it's just a good way to provide files or to get quick comments back from people. If you just want to make a quick DM to someone like, hey, do you want to go out for coffee? You can. Or hey, should we set up a meeting? Yes, you can keep it off an email. Like you don't need to waste your time with emails like that, in my opinion, in the office. So that's Slack. Before I move on to my next app on that page, since we're talking about email, I am going to mention Spark, which I think is a Mac-only product, but I think Outlook has a very similar function as well too. Hopefully, once again, I don't have anything sensitive in here. But what's really great about the new email systems and like a lot of the AI that goes into the back end of these systems now is it can really kind of sift your email notifications quite substantially. And I found that this Spark has done a really good job in sifting like all the junk I get, okay, well, what's Adobe sending? Like I get so many newsletters a day, and I'm sure you do too. That doesn't need to be the top of my queue, my email, right? Like that's like, oh, okay, I got 5 minutes I want to burn. I can go through that if I want. But like my most important thing is my personal, like who's emailing me directly. Like I want to know, is Jenny sending me an email? I got to prioritize that email. So I'm going to see it right at the top. And then I also have the added function of like being able to pin it. So then it goes down into my pin section and it stays there forever. It has a fantastic snooze option. So if I know that like, I don't want to deal with this Asper career thing for, until tomorrow, I can just do that and it's gone. I used to be a big proponent of inbox zero, which was like trying to get my email down to complete zero. And I realized that that's too much for me. Like this kind of does a good enough job. It keeps the tabs small enough that I can manage it and not feel overwhelmed, because we all have so many emails coming in, right? Like it's ridiculous. So it's nice to get the artificial intelligence just to kind of act as your personal assistant to sort of like vet what information you're getting at a top level. So anyway, I would definitely use smart inboxes in whatever system you use, but Spark has been really good. Next up is Frame.io. As I mentioned, I do a little bit of broadcast work, and a challenge previously has always been with collaborations has been feedback and review. I would get long notes and emails, and then I would have to track time code back to my edit. And it was really a big hassle. But recently, there's been a lot of review sites that have kind of come into place, and all they are is they're kind of like YouTube. Vimeo has it built in now too, so you could use it in Vimeo. It just allows you to upload your content, share that content with your collaborators. It'll open here. And you can see kind of on the right side board there is all my comments. It's all frame accurate. I'll just kind of scrub through this. It has some annotation tools like paint tools. So oftentimes I would get notes about like, hey, can you get this tiny thing out of the frame? And I would have to go back and forth and say, what frame, what thing do you mean? And with this, you can just paint right on the frame. Those notes will stay there. It can iterate back to your edit as well. This works fine for images. So if you're an artist or you're a designer, having a service like this, as opposed to sending things back and forth via email is very valuable in my opinion. And something I always do whenever I'm kind of considering a tool is looking at how does it export the data that you're generating in it. So I always make sure that it can spit that data out in a way that I can use maybe in another tool. So yeah, it's a really popular tool right now in the video world, but it can be used very easily with artwork, in my opinion. So that's Frame.io. Some competing products, as I mentioned, are Vimeo or Wix.com is another online review service for images. Okay, so I'm just taking for granted that you're going to be all the tools you use is going to be sitting on some kind of system like G Suite or Word. You're going to have something where you're making spreadsheets, and you're going to have something where you're making Word documents. With Google, what a lot of people don't ever kind of look at are some of the other tools that are included in the package. And there's tools specifically for educators. There's tools specifically for collaboration, like the one that we're akin to the one that we're using right now, which is Zoom, but for Hangouts, it's a video conferencing, online storage, calendar. You're going to have some kind of tool. What I like about Google better than say Office is the online collaboration tools just are a little bit stronger. I've mentioned Spark, which is represented by this big blue icon here, but I'm just going to talk about my two other really favorite little tiny tools that I started using the last little while. First up is the green G, which is Grammarly. You probably, if you listen to a podcast or if you are online, you'll probably get inundated with commercials for it. It is awesome. Like, it's so good for writing, especially for terrible writers like me. It's one of the few tools that I've shelled out the money for, because it is 100% worth it. Any sort of writing, whether it be an email or a newsletter, I always run through Grammarly. Anything I do, basically, I run through Grammarly, and it's a really great writing tool. It just uses it's using a whole bunch of artificial intelligence to kind of give me some suggestions on my writing, on my spelling. I don't know if on Mac users, I find the spell check in Mac to be really limited, and then it can never kind of guess what my bad spelling is. Grammarly just does a much better job of doing spell checks and commas and all that other stuff, and even just suggestions for writing, like how to clarify stuff. So Grammarly, it's got a free version, but I think it's worth whatever I paid for it, $15 or something like that, to write better, because clarity is a big component for having more effective collaborations with people. There were often times where I would write something in a big hurry, and then I would kind of review it, and I'm like, wow, I left out a lot of really important words. I can see why that person was maybe a little bit confused. So spending the time in Grammarly has been very useful for my writing and my communication. So you might have noticed in my Google bar here, kind of up in this upper right-hand area, is I have a lot of little tiny dots, and you might have some of these too. There's a zillion of them, but these are all my integrations, and integrations in web browsers used to be really bad, and now they're really good, and they really extend the functionality of your web browser. And probably for everyone here, this is whatever web browser you're using is where you're going to spend the bulk of your time. So extending its functionality and integrating it with the tools that I kind of already mentioned is really useful. So there are Grammarly extensions. There are, this Todoist is a task list thing that I can very quickly add. I can very quickly add tasks or to-dos. Have a look at the extension store for Chrome, or the Safari extension store, and you'll find loads of little tiny integrations that will improve your web browsing experience. So with all these integrations and all these tools, like I said, there's a lot of things coming at you. You're going to get notifications from Trello. You're going to get notifications from Slack. You're going to get notifications from email. You have iMessage. Everything is kind of popping at you. My goal for 2020 was to really get a lot more time being hyper-focused on things. So I bought an app called Hyperfocus, and it's also very, it's got like one purpose, and that's just like, we'll open up here, is toning down all the notifications that you get. Aren't you opening? Okay, it's not wanting to play with the Zoom software. But basically, all Hyperfocus does, and I'm sure there's equivalents on the PC side things, is it's saying how much time do you need to have uninterrupted time, where nothing on your computer is bugging you. And then you can be very app specific and say, okay, for the next 15 minutes, I'm going to be doing some deep work. I want to turn off all my notifications from Trello and from Slack. I can just hit one button, and it'll turn off all those notifications for that set duration of time. So really kind of carving out time to work and to focus is a huge benefit. And I apologize for it not launching, but it's a very simple program. Okay, so just to quickly kind of bring things to an end here, I'll just talk about my keys to success. And the first is establishing a protocol with your team, whether it be a bunch of software devs or a bunch of like arty types. Just establish that protocol, and don't be scared to say like this is what we're doing. We're going to be kind of rigid about the process, but we're going to be really flexible in hearing from you and getting your ideas, because we feel that that's an important part of this process. Now, we want to spend our time listening to input as opposed to worrying about what tools everyone's are using. So be adaptive is what I had mentioned before. Tools get discontinued by big players like Google, or smaller players get bought out, and then their apps get turned into something else. Wunderlist was something that I used for many years, and it's now being rolled into Microsoft's Notes. So I have to figure out, well, how do I transition? So don't get caught up in whatever tool you're listening to. This is kind of more of a personal project management thing that I'm also trying to get better at. Is I'm trying to be a better listener and talk less. I find I'm a big talker, and sometimes I just need to be quiet. And I find when I do that, I have more successful interactions with my collaborators or teammates. Something that I didn't mention is checking in. This can be remotely on any of these systems. Just a quick little note: hey, how are things going? Or in person, like, hey, what do you need? Just establishing some bottlenecks. That's and how can I remove those bottlenecks for that teammate or that collaborator? Because oftentimes people don't necessarily ask, if they have a problem. They'll oftentimes try to barrel through that problem without asking for help. As the project management light leader in this, it's good just to check in and say, hey, is there something I can help you with? Is there something I can get out of your way so you can do whatever task you've been assigned? Trusting your teammates is really big. I mean, you've assembled your crack team because they're all great at what they do. So let them do it. Don't try and micromanage. There's way too much complexity in the world and too many things in our collective inboxes to try and manage everyone's time. Try and manage the system and your time. Don't try and manage everyone else's time. Solicit feedback. Don't be afraid to hear from your collaborators that, hey, this isn't working. Okay, well, let me put a solution in place and let me learn from that lesson. That's something I've also taken away from the software world, is that don't be afraid to be wrong. Don't be afraid for things to fail, because you can always iterate and make it better. So thank you. These are a list of some of the things that I've talked about: Trello, Slack, Spark, Frame.io, Todoist, and Milanote. I'm happy to make this presentation available for anyone who wants it. And I'm also happy to take emails at a later date about collaboration and digital tools. And I'm also happy to talk about IDM related topics as well. So thank you for your time. Sure. I always tell high school classes that I present to, you have to have 2 questions. Otherwise, I feel like that no one was paying attention. So 2 questions. All right, that's all I need. Kick it off. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
How can I help, like, maybe a team collaborative if I'm working on a project or something direct? For marketing plans, setting up like Trello looks like. I think I saw a folder that you had there. It's like, it could be designing marketing plans. It could be designing, like, recording plans, like, all these kinds of things all in one, rather than I have yellow all over and books and stuff. And this could save my mind.
So the question was, well, it wasn't so much of a question, more of a statement of fact. Like, can Trello save your life? Yes, it can. And the great thing about the templates is, like, don't reinvent the wheel. Like, the wheel's already been invented in a lot of these templates a million times over. Just alter it for your purposes. So if you go under Trello, like, you can see on this left pane, like, the amount of categories they have for templates. So this is usually kind of where I start. And then I'll just tweak it as I need. But it sounds like what you're talking about is what you need to do is, like, keep doing your post-it notes in your notebooks if that's how you do meetings and things like that. But then just take that added step of inputting all that stuff into Trello so it's not lost, and now it can be shared with your collaborators and folks. And I mean, for you, if you're working on music, I mean, Frame.io or a service like it could also be useful in that you could, I can't speak with any sort of intelligence about music, but you could upload your WAV file or your AIF. You could pass it on to your whoever needs to listen to it, and they'd be like, oh, you know what, the drums need to come in here, or I don't like this portion of it, and they can select ranges and kind of add notes very quickly. So.
But how? So if I'm loading up a whole bunch of audio files,
mm-hmm.
and I've got somebody else. They just have this program. And do they log in like I log in? They log in on the same thing. Or how does that work?
Yeah, you as the administrator create like a kind of like a bucket for it, like a project for it. Oh, sorry. The question was about Frame.io and how the kind of the collaborator settings are created. So I'll just do a quick little thing here. I think I still have some bandwidth within Frame.io. So basically, you create teams for a project. So like, I'll just can create something called Jazz Festival. And something I didn't mention earlier is like all these tools will have integrations, and what integrations are communications to other tools. So it's an if then that sort of scenario. So I can enable those. I can enable notifications within Frame.io to say like, hey, you've added a new audio file into the Frame.io project. Slack Barry and tell him that file is up, or create a card in Trello that lists my deliverables for the week, like that, hey, this project has come up. So every single one of these products now always have integrations where it's like talking to other things and triggering one event will trigger another event. And you can get like really complicated, and like, I can say like, okay, well, if my Slack if I upload a file to Frame.io, it's going to tell Slack, and Slack is then going to tell Trello to create a card, like, and then Trello is going to tell my home assistant to play a music file, like a gong. Like it can get that convoluted if you want, but I really like kind of tweaking things like that, so I always like that. But anyway, getting back to Frame.io, you can see some of my my admin settings here, and that I can keep it private to team members that I invite. I can have it public so anyone in the world with the link can get it. It's not searchable like YouTube, where you make something public on YouTube and then, anyone could stumble across it. So you still kind of need to know, you still need to have a link to it to see it. I can add all my collaborator permissions here, who can download the file. Maybe it's maybe you're working on some special beat that you don't want a competing rapper to have. So they can't download it, they can listen to it, but they can't download it. You can set like who can invite collaborators, who can share, who can do comments. Like you can see, like it's all dialed in. Send you a link, and you set your permissions for what you want this person to be able to do or see, and then that's it. And then you'll get notifications. All this stuff triggers to your email as well too. So someone writes a comment on your new piece, you'll also get it in your inbox. So
brainstorm is I have a program, you got a program. The other person doesn't have to have a program. They just link into that.
It's all web-based. Frame.io is all web-based. Trello is web-based. Slack is web-based. There's desktop apps and mobile apps for all of them if you want them. But if you just have a web browser, that's fine. You're just logging in, you're just reviewing it, just like you would send someone a YouTube link. It's essentially the same, just with a lot more data kind of being collected, and having that benefit of having notes tied to time. That's what you don't get by writing it in an email, right? Like that's worth the cost of admission 100% on this.
It's like you don't have to go here, go there.
Just write it in, mark it up, send it to it automatically goes to your collaborator, they'll know it. What I like from this is kind of, once again, coming back to from the video world, is that I can export this data from Frame.io into my nonlinear editor. So there's probably a way to figure it out in Pro Tools or another digital audio workstation. I can import that XML file, which is the file being generated by Frame.io. And now all those comments are on my timeline, like right in front of the application that I'm working on. So I could say, okay, at 3 minutes, 23 seconds, they said, remove this interview. I can see that marker on my timeline in Premiere. So like, or Final Cut 10 or whatever I'm using. Because it's like, all this stuff is kind of generating like non-app specific data. Like, so it's usually XML data, which is like just an exchange. It's basically like database, it's exporting a database file for you. So yeah, it's really, really cool for projects. I think. Oh, sorry. I apologize. So the question was, how does someone go from like an analog PM type of methodology to the digital one? And I mean, I think it can be as simple as either, you know, just transcribing stuff. Like everyone works their own way, and if you like writing stuff down by hand, that's great. You just have to take that extra step, and I think it will pay off in the long term, and in how you can share all that. If you're taking the time to write stuff down and to plan stuff, if it's on paper, it's not going to anyone else, right? So it's an effort that's only being beneficial to you, the user. So if you take the time to transcribe it and apply it to you know, a program like Trello or Milanote or whatever, then now you have the benefit of it's all searchable now, it's shareable, and it can live on past the expiration date of you losing those sticky notes and things like that. Or taking a screenshot of a whole bunch of post-it notes on a wall, like I've seen lots of people do. Well, if you take a screenshot of post-it notes on a wall, those post-it notes are on the wall forever in that configuration. So just taking the time to translate that information into a digital resource just seems to make sense to me. Oh yeah, continuity is like huge. Like there's been so many places that I've gone to, and I know even now I sometimes think like, oh, I need to do a better job of like putting all that legacy stuff somewhere for whoever replaces me one day to have, because yeah, that's money, right? Like that's money for the company that's lost if that transition isn't seamless, if those contacts aren't in place. And I mean, at a higher level, like a content management system, you know, for companies who have the money would do a lot of that. But for personal stuff, like, yeah, we're taking the time to create art. I think documenting the process is valuable, maybe for grants and things like that in the future, or maybe for repurposing for projects when the next one that's similar comes rolling along. So yeah. Oh, sorry, I'll just get one.
So like, what is your suggestion for like getting into using?
You have to get. Oh, sorry. The question was, how do you get buy-in from a team to start using tools? I think the most powerful thing is to get actual physical people in a room and to outline the problem of your current system, like its limitations and its shortcomings, and what it's costing the organization, and then sell them on the benefits of the system and how that's going to improve. Everyone wants things to improve, but people are inherently lazy and resistant to change. But I think if you can make a compelling case, and it sounds like you can, that this would improve things by X and by Y and by Z, then usually, unless they're completely set in their ways, they will say, okay, yeah, I see the need for a system like this. Maybe it could work if we did it like that, or maybe it could work if you help me figure it out. Because I mean, a lot of people are just are scared to try something new too, right? They've got their system and they don't want to leave it, so they're nervous about it. So oftentimes, if you say like, hey, you know what, I think we should implement Trello. I think this is the reason why, and if you want me to help you like get started, I'd love to sit down with you and do it. But yeah, people just, because I'm in a similar situation with like one particular person in my organization, and it is like it's a journey, and you just have to kind of be persistent and really sell the reason why, because you're not just doing it because you want to do it, right? There's benefit. 100%. So just keep showing them what you're doing, and at least you as that one person who's the champion for it can like say like, okay, this is, you know, you present in a meeting and like, okay, here's the data, like you should be adding to this, you should be contributing to this, and it'll just strengthen the organization.
My other question was, so you showed us apps for like data management, project management, and communication, but I'm wondering if you have any suggestions for like straight up data management,
Oh, well, funny you should ask. Sorry. The question was about CRMs. And I mean, I think I've got very limited experience. We just started a new CRM system at work. I will say that CRMs always come with a very high price because they're aimed at organization, bigger organizations. There are sometimes nonprofit deals, but it's still expensive. So that, there's Salesforce is the big one. It's also, from what research we've done, the most expensive one. HubSpot is another one. The one we're using right now is called Copper. It sits on top of the G Suite, which was kind of its main selling point to us. That's what we're using. So it's kind of it's all those CRMs are usually aimed at like sales type of pipelines, and that's honestly the part I've had conceptually the biggest challenge with, is like, how do I, if I'm not trying to sell something, how do I make what my activities fit into that way of working? So it's usually just changing, like the Copper has ways of like kind of amending fields and creating your own pipeline. So it's just kind of, it's taking something and just kind of retooling it, kind of like a lot of the things I mentioned before. But it's an it's an investment. I haven't, and Juliet's on my team at Media Manitoba, like we didn't come across, like there's no like bargain basement CRM tool, because it's like, there's a financial market for that, for those tools, and it's complex. So for nonprofits, no, there's HubSpot is not. Yeah. So yeah, there's, and it's like, it's not like $19.99 a month, right? It's more, there's a lot more than that. So you just have to be, the organization has to be willing to make that investment. Yeah. No problem.
My second question.
Okay.
Is now, how do you back this all up offline, like in these programs? Like, what's the backup setup?
Okay, so the question was, what is the backup setup for all these things? I mean, we just have to kind of accept now, there is a backup, but we do kind of have to accept that like a lot of this data exists in the cloud. There are desktop versions of a lot of these tools. So open right now. I can open my Trello app, and I can kind of work offline. But that data is getting synced back and forth with the cloud. So like kind of until I have that connection, it's kind of not doing anything. As I mentioned, there are exports for most of these things that you can export. CSVs are usually something that can be like really easily exported from most of these programs. Yeah, oh yeah, it can spit it out, but then it's up to you. The onus is on you, the user, to say, okay, I'm going to put this data somewhere else now. On the few tools that I've used that have like a large data component that have kind of come to end of life, they usually seem to have a system in place to say like, okay, we know our tool is ending. We're going to give you this chance to back up your file as, whether it be like some photo program that I use will like let me download a giant zip of all my images or a whole bunch of databases. Usually there's good ways to export data, but that's definitely something you should investigate. Like when you're kicking the tires on something, like what are the export functions? That's usually where I start right at the beginning. Is file. I go to file menu and like what's under export.
Because I'm doing anything like audios, I have a triple.
Yeah, but you're talking about like physical, like you're talking about physical backups. Yeah.
This kind of stuff.
Yeah. And I mean, for files, like, I mean, that's a big challenge. It's like, obviously in the video world, that's a massive problem. And it unfortunately involves like physical medium for larger files. And I know like uncompressed data files can get big and Pro Tool sessions can get large. And so yeah, no, that's a big challenge. Just lots of hard drives, but they fail after a while. Tape, they're getting cheaper. You just have to you have more, and don't put them all in the same place. No, no problem. 1 o'clock. I did a whole hour. Great. Well, thanks so much for taking the time to listen to me ramble. And like I said, feel free. I really like talking to people. So where's I have my email. Let me write my email here. Feel free to email me. Oh gosh. Feel free to email me. And Manitoba.com. Almost see it all. Yeah, email me if you want to talk. I like to talk about art and tech and samurai movies, anything else you want to talk about. So thanks very much.